Legend of Ling Tian. Chapter 8, Worldly Affairs. As time passed, Ling Tian had arrived in this world for a year already. It was the 7th of July the next day. It was also Ling Tian's birthday, and the Ling family had already made preparations for a large banquet. It was also the 1-year-old catch for young Master Ling as well. To the Ling family, this was an extremely big event with all the upper echelons within the sky-bearing empire coming to witness the event. At the same time, they will also have a meal and bootlick the Ling family. A year was enough for Ling Tian to understand many things. With his intelligence, the conversations amongst his family members were enough to give Ling Tian a basic understanding of this world. But as he became more informed about this world, Ling Tian became more and more confused. This world, or rather, planet, was extremely different from the Earth, which he lived on in his previous life. However, there were many similarities between them. On this planet, there were 3 large continents: Heavenly Star Continent, Heavenly Sun Continent, and Heavenly Wind Continent. The continent which the Ling family is in was the Heavenly Star Continent. All of the 3 continents were separated by a large ocean. However, the humans on the 3 continents were not as complicated as those on Earth. The inhabitants on the 3 continents were all of the same skin color. If they were to be compared to the people on Earth, they would be the yellow people representing the Chinese people. It is as though this planet was completely ruled by the yellow people. Furthermore, those demon clans, bestial humans, and magic which Ling Tian imagined were non-existent in this world. On the Heavenly Star Continent, the sky-bearing empire was not the only empire. There were a total of 7 to 8 large and small empires. The relationships among the empires were not able to escape from mutual deception and war. However, the strengths of the various empires were similar, with their territorial lands evenly divided. As such, all of the empires all covetously eye on one another, waiting for an opportunity to strike. What made Ling Tian the most surprised and puzzled was that the culture on this planet was essentially the same as that on Earth. Here, they also revere Lao Tzu, Confucius, Mencius, Han Fizi, and others. At the same time, everyone here spoke Chinese as though it was a planet-wide language. In this world, there was also martial arts. However, as compared to the various sects on Earth, the martial arts in this world was just too pathetic to be compared. Almost all of the martial arts techniques here focused on external martial arts. There were only a few martial arts manuals, which were able to allow one to cultivate inner qi. The battles in this planet were fought by cold, hard steel all over. If Ling Tian were to compare the state of this planet to Earth, the state of this planet would be like the Sui and Tang dynasty, where technology was extremely lacking. Ling Tian lamented to himself, "With the amount of knowledge I have, I can be said to be like a super prophet on this planet. Goodness, just how would I be able to keep a low profile? Almost everything I say will be like the perfect edition." Furthermore, there are no computers on this planet, no internet, no television, or any media. The most ridiculous thing is that there isn't even the most basic media like newspaper. Not to mention the fact that there aren't the Xianhuan or wuxia novels, which I like to read. F***K. As Ling Tian thought about all of these, that was the first word which floated up in his mind. How can I survive like that? Ling Tian was completely frustrated. After taking a look at his grandfather's study once, Ling Tian completely gave up. In the large study, almost all of the books were narrative history and could be said to be the most hypnotic type of books. Apart from the one book called Legend of Heavenly Star Emperor, the rest of the books were filled with derogatory praises, which can make a person puke for a full 3 days and 3 nights after reading it. Only his grandfather would be able to pick it up and read it happily every day. From time to time, he even recited them out loud with joy. The thing which Ling Tian's grandfather liked to do the most was hug his grandson while holding a biography in his other hand. He would then read it out and attempt to influence his grandson with culture. After going through a round of that, Ling Tian completely did not like his grandfather anymore. That feeling was even worse than when he was beaten up in the garbage chute and had his martial arts crippled in his previous life. If he had a choice, Ling Tian would rather sit on the tiger bench than hear his grandfather recite. My goodness! Even the words, completely frightening, can barely explain just how it feels. I believe even Buddha would not be able to endure it. Out of helplessness, Ling Tian could only find a hypnotic martial art from his memory and practiced it bitterly. He did not expect it to have any other use other than to hypnotize himself when he was suffering from cultural influence by his grandfather. As such, from that day on, whenever his grandfather hugged him for a session of cultural influence, Ling Tian would hypnotize himself, and the effect was wonderful. Ling Tian became silent. He was completely pessimistic and disappointed in this world. He had lost all confidence in this world. If not for the fact that it was just too rare a chance for him to be reincarnated with his memories, Ling Tian would most likely have stopped eating to commit suicide. In that year, the only thing which Ling Tian gained was that the pure sentient qi had finally entered the first stage with the help of the divine dragon shaking formula. Do not look down on the fact that it was only the first stage. You have to know, Ling Tian used pure sentient qi to set the foundation for the first stage of the divine dragon shaking formula. In the martial arts world, this was something which only existed in legends. This meant that Ling Tian would never face the difficulties of breaking through the different acupuncture points which normal martial arts cultivators would face. As long as he continued to cultivate, the qi absorbed would be transformed into pure sentient qi in his body. If the meridians of an ordinary martial arts cultivator were like small streams with many obstructions, then the meridians in Ling Tian's body were like large smooth flowing rivers. The both of them just cannot be compared with each other. The difference between Ling Tian and an ordinary martial arts cultivator was like a pauper born into a poor family and a prince born into the imperial family. After entering Xiantian, the biggest benefit was that one would never enter cultivation deviation. In this year, Ling Tian had entered into a martial arts world which he could only dream of entering in his previous life, immersing himself completely in martial arts without any worry of disturbances. Due to the fact that he still had to play the role of an infant who did not know how to walk or speak, he had a full 24 hours each day to cultivate. This was also something which could not be avoided. If Ling Tian were to run around the place and spew vulgarities from the day he was born, no one would think that he was a genius. Instead, they would only think that he was a monster. When he was tired of cultivating his inner qi, Ling Tian revised all of the martial arts formulae which he obtained from his previous life to ensure that they were all still committed to his memory. In this planet where martial arts knowledge was scarce, Ling Tian knew just how large the wealth of knowledge he had was. If he were to casually use any of these martial arts formulae from his mind, it would be enough to cause a large earthquake on this planet. All of these would be the treasures for him to build his legend and protect his life in future, and nothing could go wrong with them. After carefully sorting through all of the martial arts formulae in his heart, Ling Tian began his next step. That was to sort through all of the martial arts techniques in his mind, which consisted of various fists, swords, palms, movements, and many other techniques. In his previous life, Ling Tian's martial arts was crippled. After being saved by Ling Menger, he stayed by the shore of the Eastern Ocean alone, and the only things which entertained him were online games and novels. Because he had a martial arts background, he was naturally more interested in fighting-type games. As he sorted through all of the martial arts techniques, Ling Tian had once again found the feeling of playing online games. Of course, the greatest difference between playing online games and what he was doing was that one was killing in a virtual world while another was a simulation of battles in his mind. Although both were virtual in nature, Ling Tian was able to emulate all of the actions with his own limbs now. As such, the moves which Ling Tian simulated were those of close combat to achieve a one-hit kill. It must be said that it was indeed a large job for Ling Tian to sort through all of this information. There was an uncountable amount of information in Ling Tian's mind, and it was simply impossible to sort through all of that in just a single year. Thus, Ling Tian only picked and chose those which he felt was more important. His first choice was to protect himself, especially since he felt so helpless and unsafe. Thus, his safety was his utmost priority. As Ling Tian lay in the cradle, he closed his eyes, looking as though he was silent and contented. But in reality, his mind was moving rapidly and incessantly. Legend of Ling Tian. Chapter 9, Young Family Head. Ever since he first lay on the cradle in this life, Ling Tian fell in love with such a feeling. It was as though he had returned to the ocean, the only time in his past life that he could ever feel at ease. Lying on the cradle gave him the impression that he was on board his yacht, facing the sunset and feeling the waves bob the boat up and down. As such, for this period of a year, Ling Tian spent almost half of it lying in that cradle. "Tianer, my darling." A gentle voice drifted over, causing the corners of his mouth to unconsciously tug upwards into a happy smile. With hands as delicate as snow and soft as cotton, they lightly pulled him into an embrace. Looking upwards, a tender and warm face filled his vision, with eyes full of indulgent love. This was Ling Tian's mother, Chu Ting'er. Beside her was a middle-aged man, about 30 years of age, with a squared face streaked with resoluteness. He could still be considered handsome. A gentle smile rested upon his face, akin to the spring winds, and an expression of satisfaction could be seen from his eyes. This could only be his father, the one who possessed the most authority in the military inside the empire, the head general Ling Xiao. Ling Xiao stooped over, giving Ling Tian's delicate baby face a light kiss. The stubble on his face felt like steel needles, bringing a brief moment of discomfort to Ling Tian, to which Ling Tian glared at him in unhappiness. This little fellow seems to be unwilling, I'll give you more to be unhappy about, As he spoke, Ling Xiao gave him 2 more kisses. Ling Tian ended up with a face full of saliva. Chu Ting'er playfully pushed her husband to the side, saying, "Shoo, shoo, shoo, your beard is so stiff, you're prickling the baby." Ha, is that so? Why didn't you voice it out last night then? Ha. Ling Xiao spoke, only to have the tender part of his waist being severely pinched by an angry and embarrassed Chu Ting'er. Ling Tian did not need to cast his eyes over to guess how wretched his father's face was right then. At that point, he suddenly understood this famous saying from his previous life: love and pain will always go hand in hand. Our son is just beside us. What nonsense are you spouting now? To think you are already a father. Still simmering with the remnants of her anger, Chu Ting'er rebuked huffily. What can this small child possibly know? Don't you agree with me, son? With the reply appeared a handsome face in front of Ling Tian, winking at him. Woo, stop meddling. Hearing the voice of the close to exploding Chu Ting'er suddenly become much softer, Ling Tian looked over, only to see her buxom and towering chest being impressively covered by a lecherous hand softly massaging it. Ling Tian was filled with fury. F***K, are you treating me like I'm invisible by displaying such poisonous scenes to corrupt a young person's mind so publicly? Ling Tian angrily grabbed onto that lecherous hand, viciously hauling it off. Ha. Our son is blaming me for infringing on his territory, ho. A crisp and bright laughing voice sounded out. With her chest finally freed, Chu Tinger, with a face flushed with embarrassment, spoke half laughingly and half in embarrassed anger, "You baddie." This soul-stirring sight moved Ling Xiao, and he couldn't help but lightly grasped onto his wife's slender waist and moved towards her mouth. Dong! However, a kick on his stomach from Ling Tian, still in his mother's embrace, effectively shut him down. Ha 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 ha. This little fellow is so domineering. The couple laughed out together this time round. A pair of footsteps was intermittently heard as it drew closer, before the person spoke. "Sire, Madam, the guests have arrived." The Grand Sire requests that Sire and Madam make their appearance. The voice belonged to a delicate and pretty-faced servant girl standing beside the couple, who lightly whispered to them. "Okay, I understand. Go tell the Grand Sire that we will be right there." My goodness, this should be the young master, right? Ever since this old man stepped out of Phoenix Cry this year, it is my first time seeing a baby. This is a little token from me, nothing great. Carrying their son, Ling Xiao and his wife had just walked into the grand hall when a viridian-colored jade charm floated in front of little Ling Tian. Sir Wang came all the way from another kingdom, braving much hardships. "How could I accept this sort of generous gift from you?" "Please retract your gift, sir," Ling Xiao courteously replied. This Sir Wang was an old man with a snow-white beard and a body covered with well-made robes. Both his hair and beard were meticulously trimmed, and one could tell that he paid the utmost attention to his bearing. Ling Tian curiously opened his eyes, only to see Sir Wang showing his displeasure by blowing up his beard. General Ling's words have a problem there. This gift was presented as a token for your son's first year, and not for General Ling. With so many imperial officials on scene, General Ling doesn't have to worry about any possible imperial impeachment because of bribery. The crowd burst into laughter at his words, echoing his sentiments. He had to be joking. Ling Xiao was currently akin to the right-hand minister, with authority below one and above tens of thousands. Even if an official was tempted with greed, who would dare to go on board this tiger to pick its fleece? Impeach him. That person had to be sick of living. The officials present all thought silently to themselves. This old man Wang just caused all of us to break out in cold sweat with that one joke. Ha ha ha, if that is the case, it would be disrespectful for me to reject you. Then, let this Ling accept your gift in place of my son. Ling Xiao only cracked a smile, seemingly unaffected by this matter. No, this is exactly the opposite. It is General who is giving me respect instead. Ling Tian could not help but roll his eyes. It seemed like this person was going all out to flatter his father, so he couldn't possibly be part of the enemy camp. Has this little brat been named yet? A similarly white-haired old man moved over this time. Ling Tian received a shock. He was already a year old, but it was the first time someone had dared to call him little brat in front of his grandfather and father. It seemed like this guy was not as simple as he seemed. Hee, old Yang, this old man here handpicked the name. He's called Ling Tian, isn't the name splendid? His grandfather, Ling Zhan, stood up as he spoke while laughing. As he listened, the more Ling Tian felt that something was wrong. Although Ling Zhan's words contained a trace of laughter, Ling Tian could sense a deeply buried hint of coldness. It seemed like this old Yang wasn't a simple person at all. Pa! As old Yang lightly clapped, he praised, "Indeed your style, Grandfather Ling, to even give such a domineering name to your grandson. Good, such an imposing name, ha ha ha. I desire to rise above the heavens, what a good name this is." As he finished speaking, the whole hall of over tens of people immediately fell into absolute silence. This old Yang's words could be said to have committed a capital offense. The emperor was also known as the Heavens, and yet Ling Zhan gave his grandson the name of Ling Tian. Even though it could be passed off as a joke, one could also frame Ling Tian for heresy. This statesman is too polite. Just like how your grandson was named Yang Huang, this old man got a rude shock when I heard it that day, wondering when the Yangs actually gave birth to an emperor. Ling Tian's eyes flashed with a chilling ray, not yielding in the slightest. Ling Tian was enlightened, as so it turned out, this old chap was actually the head of the Yang family, Yang Kong-kun. They were the only ones out of the 6 great family clans in the sky-bearing empire who had the ability to contend against the Ling family. So they were the bad guys. No wonder his face looks like it is constantly asking for a beating. Ling Tian thought to himself angrily. So from your old Ling's words, ordinary folks are prohibited to name their children with the characters of dragon or phoenix. Aren't you being too much of a nitpick, old Ling? Twirling his goatee, Yang Kong-kun spoke smilingly. If a single phrase from this old man is nitpicking, is it logical for you to talk about my grandson? Ling Tian was full of anger. Damn that old Yang. When his grandson was born, Ling Tian had gone there with good intentions to congratulate him. However, not only did Yang Kong-kun not return this favor, he chose a day like his grandson's first-year celebration to pollute the atmosphere. If he had known this was going to happen, he would have stirred that wine he prepared for old Yang's grandson's full month into a pot of mixed soup before sending it to them. Both old men glared at each other like cocks fighting for supremacy, neither willing to compromise. The surrounding civil and military officials could only look at each other in dismay, keeping mum in fear. These 2 men were people in the sky-bearing empire whose feet could cause the land to shake by just a mere step, and whom their own classes could not afford to offend. One was the Ling family's clan head, the empire's #1 duke, parent of the imperial consort and head general. The other was the Yang family's clan head, the current prime minister of this empire, father of the present empress, father-in-law of the current emperor. If one were to seek death and attempt to interrupt them, they would bring upon themselves a disaster of epic proportions. Those seated nearer to both the old men started to wipe their sweat surreptitiously while edging backwards. All came with good intentions to flatter them and get into their good books, yet they ended up in the middle of a battle between the apex powers of the empire. The crowd could only lament their misfortune. Yang Kong-kun puffed up his goatee and said, "Old Ling, this old man here was only making a casual remark. When did I ever say that your grandson's name wasn't good? This old man here came with good intentions to congratulate you, but look at you, repaying kindness with animosity." Ling Tian drew back the corners of his mouth, forming a smile that was not really a smile, as he retorted, "That is true. Both of us old fogies gave good names to our grandchildren. However, this old man's grandsons seems to be brighter than yours, Yang Kong-kun decided to quit while he was ahead and only chuckled, "You may say that, but this old man is much busier as compared to you. Hayes, I have to placate 3 grandsons every day, and the worst part is that I still have 2 granddaughters. One minute I'm carrying one, the next, another. This gives me backaches. This kind of hardship is hard to endure. Unlike you, old Ling, who only has one and is so free, only having to carry him once every few days. You even have time to spend taking care of your garden. What an envious lifestyle." As he spoke, the latter hammered at his waist in pretense with a face full of grievances. Although Ling Tian was fuming deep inside, he could not come up with a suitable retort. His family was small in number, especially so in Ling Tian's generation, where only one seedling could be seen in a 3,000 miles plot of land. Yang Kong-kun's words were obviously targeting at the fact that his house was not as flourishing as his. However, the truth was as such, and Ling Tian could not straighten his back from this insult. He could only hatefully glare at his son as he scolded, "Useless thing." Ling Xiao had his arms coiled around his wife and child all this while, engrossed with watching the two old men fight it out. How could he have foreseen disaster falling from the sky? Now that his own father's anger was directed towards him, he could only shrink back without a word, putting on a bitter expression. If his father were to suggest that he take a concubine in front of the crowd, he would be placed in a difficult situation. Tinger's face was red with embarrassment and anger. Stretching out her slim fingers that were smooth as jade, she gave her husband's waist a vicious pinch and twist. As a daughter-in-law, she naturally could not speak out even if the grandsire's mouth was without tact. However, by her side was a human punching bag. It would be a waste if she did not utilize it. Ling Xiao could only draw in a breath of cold air, grimacing in pain. Ling Tian's little face appeared to be excited at the whole lively scene that was unfolding in front of him. However, he was actually sneering to himself, "Old Yang, you need not look so pleased. Since you dared to offend this young master here, I'll make sure I'll send your 3 grandsons into the palace to be eunuchs in a few years' time and trick your 2 granddaughters over to be my concubines. Then I'll see how arrogant you can be." Ha ha ha. Upon seeing the battle between the two come to an end, the crowd could also finally breathe easy. They immediately burst out into idle chatter in an attempt to shift the attention of the 2 old men away from each other in case they decided to go for another round. If they were to start another battle, then wouldn't everyone that had come here today seem like they were here for the purpose of watching a show instead of celebrating? Furthermore, how could anyone of their class be able to such a fiery show without penalty? Conveniently at that moment, an earth-shattering sharp voice sounded from the front door. "The Emperor, Empress, and the Imperial Consort have arrived." Legend of Ling Tian. Chapter 10, Framing the Queen. Ling Tian almost laughed. He finally heard the classic script line. In his past life, he was pulled by his sisters to watch a few different dramas, especially those of the Qing dynasty. There was always an official crying out like that. As such, the most memorable thing Ling Tian had about those shows was the phrase, "The Emperor has arrived." He thought that he wouldn't be able to hear it anymore after entering a different world. Who would have thought that it would still be shouted out in reality? Ling Tian could not help but think to himself, "Don't tell me this line also came to this world with me." As everyone stood up to receive him, a man who looked about 30 years old dressed in a yellow robe walked in front. He had an average-sized figure and showed signs of putting on weight. His nose and mouth were lifted with an aura of nobility surrounding him. Beside him, there were 2 beautiful ladies dressed extravagantly. Standing beside each other, they each had their own separate kind of beauty. Ling Tian knew that one of the 2 was his own aunt. With a single glance, he was able to immediately identify her. Perhaps, it could be said that he was able to do so even before looking. The lady to the right of the Emperor, who emitted a chilly and irritable aura, was definitely not his own aunt. The lady to the left of the Emperor, who had a friendly aura and was beaming with excitement to rush over, was definitely his aunt, consort Ling Ran. After paying greetings to everyone, Ling Ran ignored her status as a consort and ran over, snatching Ling Tian from Chu Tinger's bosom. The next instant, Ling Tian's face was full of saliva from her kisses. "Ha ha ha, little thing, you're finally not asleep. Aunt has come over to check on you a few times, but you were always asleep like a pig. I say, little thing, were you born in the year of the pig in your previous life?" "Stupid little pig, fragrant little pig, Aunt's Ling Tian piggy." Ha ha ha. Ling Tian broke out in sweat. "This aunt of mine is really so valiant. To think that she has come to see me a few times already. What a pity that I have always been asleep. Ha ha ha, sister-in-law, this little child is so fragrant. He is such a cute little piggy. He is just too beautiful to death. Ah. No, 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 I can't say death. Let aunt kiss you again. Ling Tian stared at his overly enthusiastic aunt with anger. Aunt, although I am your nephew, I am not a clump of dough. It hurts to be rubbed all over by you, you know. Ha, since younger sister loves to have a son so much, you should find the time to have one with the emperor. Then you will be able to play with him all day, ha ha ha. Chu, Tinger teased Ling Ran softly. Ah, sister-in-law, you're being annoying. Little Tian, ha ha ha, you're so fair. This aunt just can't get enough of you. Brother, look at little Tian's eyes. Wow, he has double eyelids. Also, his face is just so comfortable to rub. Ah, what are you doing? Quickly, return him to me. Ling Xiao could not bear to see his son get bullied by Ling Ran like that and snatched his son back. Then, he scolded sternly, you are already a consort. How can you be so unrestrained without bearing your image in mind? Can't you be more refined? You better be careful that the emperor doesn't divorce you. What? Let you hug him for a while longer. My son's face would be all bruised by you if I were to allow that. A yellow-dressed figure then walked in front of Ling Tian and said, Ha, how would I do that? Ranner's temperament is just naturally so lively. After so many years, she is still as lively and innocent as ever. We really like him. Ha ha ha, come little boy, let your uncle give you a hug. Following the gentle voice, Ling Tian felt that he was in the arms of another person. He then opened his eyes and looked carefully at the emperor's face as though he was extremely curious. In actual fact, Ling Tian could see the expressions hidden under the emperor's eyes extremely clearly. This was the advantage a child had. Facing a 1-year-old child, everyone's guard would inevitably be reduced greatly, revealing the thoughts which they would usually hide completely. After all, even if the 1-year-old baby was a genius, just what would he be able to understand? But no one would ever guess that Ling Tian actually had a mental age of 26 years old. At this moment, Ling Tian could see the complicated look in the emperor's eyes. There were a few elements of joy, worry and contradiction. Plenty of emotions flashed by his eyes, and they were all committed to Ling Tian's memory. Following which, another pair of fair hands hugged Ling Tian. Those were the hands of the empress who had been standing behind the emperor. Ling Tian knew that the empress, Yang Shui, was the precious daughter of the Yang family head, Yang Kongkun. This lady was also the person he wanted to meet the most after he knew that someone wanted to poison his mother and him. Ling Tian then lifted his head and observed this lady closely. Unsurprisingly, this empress lowered her head as though she was only focused on teasing Ling Tian who was in her arms. But from Ling Tian's angle, he was able to see a hidden coldness in her heart together with a deep hatred and worry. However, she was still able to betray her heart and said, Emperor, take a look at how cute this child is. Ling Tian's face turned cold. This lady is definitely related to that event. She is definitely going to be a trouble eventually. Now that I have not grown up yet and am still unable to protect myself, it would be best for me to find a way to restrain her. I must definitely restrain her power. Very quickly, a cunning smile appeared on his face. Ling Tian had an idea. As though he was mumbling something, he stretched out both his hands, with one of them grabbing a strand of hair by her cheek and the other pinching the jade peaks right in front of him. At the same time, he struggled and bit down. Ah! An ear-piercing shriek sounded and the empress let go both of her hands. One of her hands reached out to her hair while the other to her chest. As for Ling Tian, his small body began falling to the floor. The surface of the hall was made of solid limestone. Everyone then began to exclaim and Chu Tinger almost fainted from shock. While many words would be required to describe the scene, it all happened in an instant. Ling Ran, who was the nearest, had rushed forward, saving the small Ling Tian right before he fell onto the floor. The whole event took place at a lightning-fast speed. Ling Tian was already in Ling Ran's bosom before everyone even got to react to the situation. However, everyone clearly saw that the Empress was the one who let go of the child all of a sudden. Her action simply looked like it was premeditated. Furthermore, the Emperor and royal uncle Yang Kong-kun actually did not have any reaction when the child fell down. Instead, the one who caught the child was Ling Ran, who was slightly further away. The next moment, everyone was dumbfounded and the place was filled with pin-drop silence. Everyone all thought, *T just got real. Things probably won't end so easily. Everyone present is extremely worried. This matter can be big or small. If it is small, the Emperor will just suppress the matter and ensure that everything is status quo on the surface. If things get blown up big, it wouldn't be impossible for both the families to fight. If something like that happens, the winds in the sky-bearing empire are going to change for sure. However, what everyone did not see was the delightful smile on Ling Tian's face. The 20 to 30 strands of hair on his right hand silently fell and left no trace on him. As for his left hand, he rubbed his index finger and thumb together as he wore an evil smile on his face, reminiscing something. "Empress, what is the meaning of that? How can you bear to harm such a small child?" Ling Ran, who was hugging Ling Tian, still had a lingering fear as her body trembled slightly. The moment she composed herself, she began to roar like a lioness. Following which, Chu Tinger clumsily sprinted over with a face full of tears. She hugged Ling Tian's small body tightly in her arms as her body trembled and she began to whimper. Ling Zhan's beaming face turned ashen as his eyes turned red. He glared at the Empress, who was in panic with a killing intent rising in the atmosphere. Even though he was in front of the Emperor, he did not conceal it in the slightest. Ling Zhao's face was completely dull, without any expression, with his hands holding on to the hilt of his sword. Facing Ling Ran's interrogation, the Empress's face turned pale as panic filled her eyes. She then stuttered, No, it wasn't on purpose. Just now, that child. He pulled my hair. He pinched my... I really didn't do it on purpose, Emperor. A wave of killing intent towards the Empress filled the place, and the atmosphere became deadly. All around, everyone from the Ling family was filled with a killing intent as they grabbed the hilt of their swords. The Empress couldn't bear with the pressure and broke out into tears. The Emperor's face turned ashen and he shouted out with a wave of his sleeves, "Men, send the Empress back to the palace." At this moment, the Emperor was already certain that this was definitely a conspiracy between the Empress and her father. However, this conspiracy was just too brainless. She actually enacted such a lousy act in front of the Emperor. Did they really think that the many officials and generals present were idiots? Now that they created such a huge trouble, how would he be able to settle the matter easily? A chill flashed past as he looked at Yang Kong-kun. It seemed that he had given them too much leeway. Wait. Ling Zhan squeezed his way out of the crowd and said, "The Empress is going to leave like that. Don't tell me you are not going to give this old man here an explanation." The chill in his tone was like the chilly winds blowing from hell. Duke Ling was enraged. This was something intolerable. The Ling family had a single descendant for 3 generations and his son had no activity for 5 to 6 years after they got married. After waiting for so long, his daughter-in-law's stomach finally rose up as she gave the Ling family a new child. Everyone in the family was extremely careful when taking care of him, caring for him as though he was tofu. But never would he have expected that on such a joyous occasion, Ling Tian would be almost killed by this woman under the watchful eyes of everyone. Too bold. So what if you're from the Yang family? Don't tell me this old man here would not dare to kill you. Yang Kong-kun also became flustered as he stepped forward and anxiously replied, Duke Ling, everyone saw that it was a misunderstanding. Knowing that they were in the wrong, Yang Kong-kun had already lost the pride he's displayed earlier. How could he still be concerned about his face at such a moment? Thus, he lowered his pride. Ling Zhan laughed out loud as his voice became solemn. Misunderstanding. Ha ha ha, misunderstanding. Yang Kong-kun, you old bastard. You dare say that such a thing was a misunderstanding. My grandson was almost killed in the hands of your daughter, and you dare brush it off as a misunderstanding? Yang Kong-kun was enraged by the fact that he was called an old bastard. However, he could not do anything about it. As sweat filled his whole face, Yang Kong-kun held on to the arm of Ling Zhan and said, Old Ling, listen to me, this was indeed a misunderstanding. Sometimes, people's hands would slip. Ling Zhan's face changed. Slip of hand. Yang Kong-kun, what if this old man has a slip of hand too? A chilly voice sounded. The killing intent within it was not concealed at all. This old man's hand will slip towards the 3 grandson of yours. Yang Kong-kun, what do you think about that? Legend of Ling Tian. Chapter 11, Empress Yang Shui. Elder Ling. At the side, the emperor finally could not bear to continue sitting on the sidelines, lest this hot-tempered Duke Ling really gets rid of the 3 grandsons of the Yang family. When that happens, the matter would be irreparable, and even his sky-bearing empire would follow both their family clans and disappear from the face of this earth. No matter what, it was the Empress's fault today. Elder Ling can be assured that I would give Senior an appropriate answer. The Emperor had no other alternatives. He was the monarch of a nation, but he just can't afford to provoke these 2 old men. He had no choice but to put down his pride and hold his grievances inside his heart. He thought to himself, in all the generations of emperors, I am probably considered the most cowardly and spineless one. Now, there are 2 people in the court whom I do not dare to provoke. If it wasn't to maintain the stability of this country, why would I bother to suffer such anger? Since the emperor had spoken, even if Ling Zhan was unwilling, he still had to give face to the emperor and back down. After all, he was the emperor. Besides, with all the civil and military officials present, if he were to slap the emperor's face in front of so many people, it would be the end of the line for his family even if the time has not come. It seemed like Ling Zhan still had to bide his time for the matters of the Empress. Furthermore, after the momentary rush of anger, Ling Zhan's head also gradually cleared. He began to find the matters a little too outrageous to believe. Knowing how devious Yang Kong-kun was, how could he resort to carrying out such a joke of a plan? They had competed their whole lives, and Ling Zhan was very clear that this was completely not his style. Thus, he could only shake his head with a face full of depression. The Empress Yang Shui was then escorted by Yang Kong-kun himself back to her palace, since Yang Kong-kun himself was unassured of her safety. As the head of the Yang family, Yang Kong-kun was naturally extremely familiar of the ways his opponent Ling Zhan worked. This guy was naturally lawless and fearless. Even though his daughter might have been crowned empress, in that old fogey's eyes, the title had no meaning. And if it went from push to shove, Ling Zhan would not have any second thoughts. If no one was able to give a satisfactory explanation to the latter for today's incident, with a suitable compensation, it didn't matter that his daughter had the title of empress, her head would still roll. Before they left, Yang Kong-kun unexpectedly turned his head back to stare directly at Ling Zhan. He spoke in a heavy tone, "Ling Tian, we have fought with each other for our whole lives. You know me as well as I know you. If I really wanted your grandson's life, how would there be such a situation as today's taking place? While I may not be able to take care of your entire Ling family, do you think the life of this little thing would faze me, Yang Kong-kun?" Yang Kong-kun was extremely direct and serious in his manner of speech, showing how unbridled he was. As he spoke, all civil and military officials, including the emperor, were at the scene. Such lawlessness. However, Yang Kong-kun knew that only by doing so could he even have the chance to protect his daughter's life. Only by doing so could he restrain the raging flames of Ling Tian's anger. Furthermore, although such words seemed to be filled with a bold spirit, this undoubtedly served as a form of explanation to Ling Tian, and Yang Kong-kun was undoubtedly admitting his weakness. Following this line of thought, this showed that he was admitting his inferiority in his heart. To such a prideful person like Yang Kong-kun, this was worse than death. However, Yang Kong-kun had to do such a thing, because no matter how brash he was, he could not be compared to Ling Tian, who did not even recognize the heavens if he were to be riled up. This old fogey could literally do anything and everything. Hearing this proclamation from Yang Kong-kun, the emperor's face twitched slightly. However nasty sounding the words were, it was actually the best method for the imperial family. At the very least, both families would not cause any trouble in the near future. However, deep in his heart, the Emperor Long Xiang was feeling terrible. In his life, he had never wanted to exterminate the two unbearably domineering great families as much as today. He was clear that as long as both of them continued thriving, the imperial family standing would forever not be rock solid and stable. And yet, if one of them were to fall, then the entire sky-bearing empire would follow suit and collapse. It was either that both of them would survive, or if not, both of them would fall. There was no third option. Thus, he could only endure. Having finished what he wanted to say, Yang Kong-kun turned around to leave. Ling Tian stood with furrowed brows, deep in thought for what seemed like half a day before he suddenly smiled. As though nothing had happened, he exclaimed, "For all of you great lords for making the effort to attend this ceremony today, this old man expresses his utmost gratitude. Especially the emperor, who specially took time off his busy schedule to grace my humble home. This truly makes this little old man's face glow in happiness." At this point, this old man first thanks the emperor for his generosity. As he finished, he sank into a deep bow, bending deeply from above his waist. Long Xiang hurriedly helped him up, saying in a pleasant tone, "Elder is too polite. Today's matters leave us in deep embarrassment." Ling Tian laughed heartily while replying, "You are exaggerating too much, Emperor." At this point, his eyes sparkled as he ordered, "Men, bring up the items. This old man wants to see what kind of interesting item his grandson would pick up, ha ha ha." The crowd couldn't help but prostrate in admiration of Ling Tian. Facing such a matter, a normal person would be angered beyond reason. To have one's children suffering from such a shock, most would have already carried their darlings into the inner chambers. However, this Duke Ling here was all frowns and glares one moment, yet as happy as a lark the next moment. This kind of face-changing technique had already reached the point of perfection. He carried on as though nothing had ever happened and even insisted that his grandson carry on with the item choosing. This, coupled with the fact that it seemed like for him to be able to dominate all under the heavens from a young age, as well as to stand strong for 40 over years, he definitely had a thing or two up his sleeves. Some of the officials who had long held disagreements deep in their hearts now silently heaved a sigh of relief. As it turned out, this distracted old man was actually playing a pig to eat the tiger. Thankfully, no one in their class ever dared to step out to challenge him. This was truly wise of them. Judging by this old fox's standard, he would be like those who would make his helpers count the silver he was about to get for selling them, one had to again reassess the abilities of the Ling family. In his heart, Ling Tian felt that his grandfather should have gone to his world to act in an opera theater. However, in actuality, those people had actually overestimated Ling Zhan. Ling Zhan had already held some suspicions that this matter was not carried out by Yang Kong-kun. If one wanted to insist that this was absolutely not a coincidence, then they could only point fingers at his empress's daughter for trying to act smart. If that was the case, he would definitely not take such a short-sighted woman as a matter to be worried about. At this juncture, Yang Kong-kun was sitting with his daughter, Empress Yang Shui, in the carriage, wearing a grave expression. What exactly happened back there? You would normally be more capable of controlling yourself. Yang Shui wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Even her own father was also suspecting her. Father, today's incident was really an accident. Yang Kong-kun scrutinized her face, as though he was scanning her face with some profound method, before speaking. Continue. Yang Shui finally gained some semblance of calmness, and narrated the incident that happened just now, tearfully saying, I was suddenly in pain from both my head and chest. How could I not let go? This caused Yang Kong-kun to furrow his brows and remain silent. At this point, both parent and daughter had the same doubtful thought in their hearts. Who was the exact mastermind behind this? Could it be that there is a hidden fourth powerhouse in Sky-bearing Empire? Both of them never thought of the baby that caused this fiasco. After all, that was just an infant who would even stutter when calling for his parents. Yang Kong-kun thought for a long while, before saying, even if it wasn't you, and even if this whole thing was an accident, this tactic has definitely crossed your mind before, hasn't it? Yang Shui could only lower her head to signify her agreement. Letting out a deep sigh, Yang Kong-kun remarked bleakly, a woman that has been married out is just like water that has been thrown out. Dad is not blaming you. Instead, it would be stranger if you did not think that way. Letting out another sigh, he seemed to have aged all of a sudden. Yang Shui was naturally intelligent and quickly grasped what her father meant by such a sentence. Although it seemed like both the Ling and Yang families were at loggerheads with each other, their lives were actually intertwined. If the Yangs were to destroy the Ling family, then that would also be the end of the road for the Yangs. Only because both families had misgivings over each other and were curbing the other, could the present scene in Sky-bearing Empire remain. If one family ceased to exist, the uncontrollable rise of the other surviving family would definitely catch the attention of the royal family, which would eliminate them to prevent this force from rising up any further. Thus, from another angle, to extinguish the Lings was to destroy his own family bloodline. The thought of this led to Yang Kong-kun's current mood. However, Ling Shui had her own reasons for thinking so. Her own son, the current crown prince of this dynasty, was already 3 years old, and she had to start planning for her son's future. The power held by the Ling family was too immense, whether it was in the government or military. They were both equally and unreasonably powerful. In the past, the Ling family had no descendants, and thus even if they had the ambition, this would only lead to their own downfall due to the lack of heirs. However, times have changed. With the addition of this little thing, this could be said to be the tipping point. The Ling family was simply too large and too powerful, to the point that even the royal family was unable to rest easy any longer. If they were to have any ambitions, then the Empress's son would definitely not be safe. Yang Shui was naturally unwilling to see such a scene. Thus she put in the effort to set up countermeasures, planning to let both her family and the Ling family drag each other down. Once her son steps up to become the emperor, he would still be able to provide some form of leeway for her family. As long as her son managed to sit on the throne, even if the Yangs were to be on the decline, they would have the chance to rise again from the ashes. However, if she were to let the Ling family snatch the advantage, then this would not just be a problem for the Yang family, but even the royal family would become like scattered ashes and dispersed smoke. Before she entered a marriage, she was just a pure and innocent girl from the Yang family. However, she was now first a mother and thus had to look out for her son. Secondly, she was the empress of this current dynasty and would of course have to protect the foundation of the royal family. Lastly, she was considered a female of the Yang family. Thus, although she felt guilty towards her father, she did not think that she had done anything wrong. Young Kong-kun let out a long sigh, seemingly aging a few years in a short time. Only after a long while did he finally speak. The Lings shouldn't be finding you for trouble but will definitely pay closer attention to you. I will not stop you from doing your thing, but at least within the next few years, you are not allowed to carry out any plans. He sighed before he continued in a tone of melancholy. Take care of yourself, only then will you be able to defeat the enemy. Okay, we're almost at the palace. I'll head back first. As he finished, he did not wait for Yang Shui to reply and left the palanquin directly. Yang Shui stared at her father's silhouette as the rims of her eyes reddened. However, she did not say anything in the end. After getting down, Yang Kong-kun stood for a while, as though awaiting some form of reply from her. However, sensing that Yang Shui was not going to talk, he gave another deep sigh before putting his hands behind his back and walking away. 2 steps later, he suddenly stopped and slowly spoke. He is but an infant. Even if he is a genius, you still have time before he becomes an adult. Why not take a few years to observe? For all you know, he might not even be worth your attention. Don't give in to groundless fears. At most, if the worst comes the worst, it is still not too late to carry it out. Hearing this, Yang Shui's eyes suddenly gleamed. As he finished speaking, Yang Kong-kun strode away briskly, never turning his head back once. His daughter was, after all, not merely his daughter anymore. At the same time, she was the mother of the current crown prince and the emperor's wife. Being her father, he had already made her life difficult for her past 18 years. There was no need to continue making her life difficult. This matter would be left for her to do as she deemed fit. Watching her father's shadow slowly disappear, she noticed that it was more slouched than before, which left her in a daze and unable to speak. Her eyes started to brim with unshed tears. It was a good while after that before she finally regained the clear and cold look in her pupils, with her gaze slowly turning back to a frosty look. Lazily stretching out on the seat, she coldly ordered, "Proceed on to the palace."